You and I know once you come here, you get that Stanford email address and inbox. The wealth of the resources is extremely overwhelming.
This was not on my why Stanford essay. But this is a very big part of it.
You scored full mark on the GMAT.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Wait, what are like a few major differences, let's say, between Stanford and IIT Bombay or like the major IITs?
One thing that a lot of folks, when they do their application process, tend to neglect is...
Today, our first guest is someone who's lived a life of grit and relentless ambition. From becoming an accidental entrepreneur in his first year in IIT Mumbai to scoring a perfect Gmat score. Starting from a small mountain village school where electricity was barely available to walking the prestigious halls of Stanford Graduate School of Business. Welcoming Shubhankar Mihir Seth.
Shubhankar Sid, good morning.
Good morning, Sare.
Thank you for joining me on the MBA Odyssey podcast. You're the first guest I have here. And how does it feel to walk the corridors where the founders of Netflix, Google, and LinkedIn have walked before?
It's an incredibly empowering and overwhelming experience. I think the fact that GSB has this motto of change lives, change organizations, change the world, I think it's just incredible because everybody here is out to do those things. There's so many people and so many resources here to that allow you to make that happen. But it's also an incredible onus on you that you're the one who's been entrusted with this opportunity, and you better make it count. So I think like that duality is something I feel every single day that I spend here at Stanford.
I can imagine. It weighs on me. It weighs on me every day.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing I think about before going to bed every night.
100%.
And tell me a little bit about where your Odyssey started.
I spent my entire childhood in the mountainous northern part of India, which is Uttarakhand, Ladakh, Himachal, all Himalayan regions, right close to the border with China.
Nice.
And of course, now like I visited recently and things are changing. But back when I was growing up, these parts of India were quite cut off from the rest of the mainstream.
I would imagine they would be also a little bit more underprivileged also in terms of infrastructure and all that.
Like I didn't grow up needing anything, but life revolved around frugality.
I can imagine.
The places that we grew up did not have a lot of infrastructure that we take for granted today, right?
Yeah.
Like just for context, the school that I went to on most days didn't have electricity, clean, hygienic washrooms. Like now that I look back at all of that, I feel that fostered two very important things. I think one was this general spirit of resilience and to, make the best of what you get. You will find surprising that very small school, which lacked all of these resources, consistently produced graduates that went to some of India's and the world's top universities and are doing fantastic things, which in
I can see one of them right in front of me.
It feels just amazing, right? Like a place nestled away in the hills. Essentially, so, one thing was like an individual resilience to try and make the best of what you get. And the second, growing up in places like this is also a spirit of like community resilience. That like we are all in this together.
Yeah.
And the only way any of us succeed is if all of us succeed. So we got to have each other's backs.
I think you went to IIT Bombay,
Yes.
It's Indian Institute of Technology.
Yes.
It's a very sought after university. We have multiple branches. Some of the branches are really, really difficult to get in. And Bombay is surely one of those branches, I'm assuming, which is very hard to get in. So really props to you. I know you guys take this university entrance exam to get into university. And you have to really rank pretty highly to be able to get into IIT Bombay. Yeah.
I went to IIT expecting that I would learn so much about engineering, about how to use technology for good. How my primary interest was, of course, born out of seeing what I could learn there. And, how I could leverage technology to improve lives back home. I did learn all of those things and I did graduate as a mechanical engineer. But I think the biggest learning I had at IIT was that I realized the extent of my own privilege. I think I come into IIT thinking that, okay, like I'm someone who's coming from like more remote parts of India, from small town India, and life here is going to be completely different. But I think it really opened my eyes to the privilege I didn't even know I had.
You're here, you've been in IIT Mumbai, one of the best universities, admittedly, for technical studies in the world, and obviously in India as well. And then now you're here in one of the best universities of the world. What are, if you could also keep it short, that would be great. What are like a few major differences, let's say, between Stanford and IIT Bombay, or like the major IITs?
I think there's 2 or 3 big differences that stand out to me, and I'll keep it brief. I think the first is that the American education system offers, just by design, a lot more flexibility than India's, which, given our history with colonial rule, is largely based on the British academic ecosystem. So I think this flexibility that the US affords is both, again, empowering and confusing, because you could literally walk into a university, change your major, do 1,000 other things, which is not something that you could pull off in India. You go to university with a specified course and then stick to it. So I think, it gives you more opportunity to experiment with different things and then really think about what you want to do. But it's also just so vast that people can find making that choice overwhelming. Whereas in India, largely the system makes the choice for you.
Yes.
I think the second big difference is how different the classroom is. And honestly, that's been a very eye-opening experience for me ever since I got here. The American classroom is a lot more interactive. It's a lot more two-way. There is an inherent obligation on the part of the student to not just participate, but add or dissent to what is being said. And this can, reach the level of openly disagreeing or challenging your professors.
Yes.
And that's okay. And
yes.
I think just culturally is not something that would work in India. I think would be seen as somewhat disrespectful. So I think that has been a little bit of a cultural adjustment for me to make. And I think thirdly, I think evaluation criteria, just like the admissions process at the university, evaluation criteria are a lot more holistic.
Yes.
I think most courses that are taught in undergrad, like very rich, deep technical courses, but you were evaluated on a midterm and an end term.
Yeah.
And how how your ability to solve problems in a timed format. Whereas here, it's a lot more about unconstrained group projects with no time limit, really putting in the best of what you have. A lot of, so many of our classes allow use of, say, ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. So it's really about solving that problem in as close to a real world environment as possible.
Yes.
And I think again, that it's a little bit of a shift between.
Great.
Yeah. So I think these are 3 big differences that I feel.
Tell me a little bit more. Like, what did you do after IIT Bombay? What kind of employment did you pursue? How was it? How did you like it?
Probably like to talk about a couple of things here. The first is that I started up when I was in undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
So this was right in the first year of IIT. We created an edtech company. Had absolutely no intention of creating it. Was an accidental entrepreneur who got lucky.
Yes. I think 20% of our class in Stanford GSB would say the same thing. I had no intention of creating it. When I created it, it happened to be pretty successful.
Some of the best companies that I know of are born out of the need to solve a problem and not necessarily create a company. And I think that's exactly what we were. We were just trying to help people learn computer science because and I apologize to the bad press to IIT Bombay, but we had a computer science professor who was absolutely terrible.
I'll take. Okay.
Yes, we just designed a tool to help some of our classmates learn better. And, they liked it. People across campuses liked it and became a company.
Jesus.
We ran it for a few years. And of course, those were fun times. This was me and my college roommate. We were trying to balance classes with doing all of this.
Yes.
And I think, again, why I come back to that point of being an accidental entrepreneur is because when I graduated, as much as I loved the work that we'd done, I did not want to pursue it any further, but my entire goal of creating that company had always been about helping my classmates, and that purpose had been accomplished. And I, even when I was founding that company and running it, I didn't have a vision of like, saying that, okay, I want to make this, the next big tech firm. So, I think a few months after graduating, we took a call that we didn't want to continue running it. We spoke to a few people who were interested in buying the specific products. And then we decided to move on from that company because I think both of us felt our passions.
Yeah,
there.
I can imagine. And I know that at some point in your career, you joined McKinsey, as a consultant. Was that after?
This was right after this.
Okay.
Right. And I think McKinsey was a little bit of serendipity for me. And why I say that was because I joined McKinsey in the integrative track, right? So the generalist consultant who does everything from marketing to strategy to finance to across industries.
PowerPoint, yeah.
Yes.
I understand.
But I think my experience was remarkably unique because right off the bat, I had the opportunity to work with McKinsey's sustainability practice. And like my very first project, which you absolutely have zero control over, ended up being one of the most landmark studies that the firm did on establishing good decarbonization practices for one of the world's largest metals and mining companies. So of course, this was super, super exciting for me, especially because the firm had not done such work before.
I can imagine.
So we were establishing new frontiers. To establish those new frontiers, I had to talk to some of the leading researchers
of decarbonization,
of metallurgy across the world.
Yes.
So it's like, the inner engineer in me who was perhaps a little concerned about going to the business side of things was also satisfied that, okay, that mechanical engineering degree is being put to good use.
I can imagine.
And thirdly, I think it really aligned with my own personal passion for sustainability. And I know I haven't spoken about that so far, but just to give you a little bit of context is like, the places where I grew up.
Yes.
Uttarakhand, Himachal, Jammu and Kashmir. These are all states in India where people live in close proximity with nature and also to a large extent in harmony with nature.
I can imagine.
Right? But these are also, like the Himalayan ecosystem is so fragile that despite not having contributed so much to climate change, the impact of climate change is most visible.
They're on the receiving end of it, basically.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that climate change disproportionately affects stakeholders who are already on the margin is something that, that I kept seeing as I was growing up.
Yes.
And then, from ground subsidence in one of the places that I grew up to flash floods, to cloudbursts, to landslides, I think I realized that I wanted to tackle this problem head on. And I think the first study that I did at McKinsey really became that platform for me to build expertise around this topic.
Understand.
And then actually be able to work with companies across the globe.
Yes.
Whether in LATAM or Southeast Asia or Europe to on the topics of decarbonization, which I think, is pretty rare in a place like McKinsey, because like every region has its own experts.
Yes.
So I think the fact that it gave me the opportunity to actually also try and tackle this problem globally is what kept me really excited about. Unfortunately, both in India and the US is not a great consumer pull force.
Yes.
It's more a regulatory force. It is more of, in some cases, a commercial force.
Yes.
But very rarely are people going green because consumers demand that they're going green. This is in sharp contrast to, say places I've been to in Western Europe, where the government isn't so concerned.
Absolutely.
But the people are really, really forcing local conglomerates and companies to change their stance.
Yes.
So I think, in that sense, like going across different markets gave me some of these very interesting insights.
I lived in Europe for 7 years,
right?
3.5 years in Netherlands, 3.5 years in Germany. And I could totally see that with the people. Like the general public took a lot of ownership. and maybe even responsibility in like pursuing like more sustainable solutions, be it in their consumption behavior or even like how they would make investment decisions in some companies and whatnot. So I totally understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I think the interesting shift that I've seen in India, as compared to a lot of other countries where, like in the US, where sustainability is more regulatory determined, is that more and more people in India and especially some of the very large industry houses, see sustainability beyond a compliance risk and beyond a philanthropic endeavor, actually as a value creation opportunity. So most clients that I would have initial conversations with were very defensive about ESG. That, okay, these are the, when we do ESG reporting, these are the things we're expected to report. This is where we get flack from like public forums, from NGOs, from the government, etc. These are long-standing issues. So what is our strategy to mitigate our risk?
Yes.
And like not face fines, not get into like judicial concerns, etc. Which is important, but it's a disservice to yourselves and the planet.
Yes.
And that's how I look at it. Because on both fronts, sustainability is an incredible opportunity to improve both your top line and your bottom line. And like for the example that you wanted, I think I was working with one of India's largest iron and steel players. And again, very similar concerns. Plant, had faced some flack from the local community for drawing too much water, stuff like that. And that was very important to fix. So of course, we talked about what the mitigation strategies there are.
Immediately to...
Yes, to ensure that all stakeholders feel included in the process. However, I think in a lot of conversations that I had with the CEO, of course, I started small and I talked to him about how I could synergize cost and carbon for them.
Yes.
And like really implement some small things that would enhance water reusability or energy efficiency. So it would both cut costs and remove carbon. Right. So this part actually is still slightly easier to do. But I think the really important thing was creating a mindset change and like going from being defensive on ESG to actually being aggressive with sustainability. To the point where I had the CEO raise some green financing and sustainable financing to actually start putting up one of the first green steel pilot projects in India.
Awesome.
Which then, this company is already exporting steel to different parts of the world.
Yes.
But from this green steel production, the exports that went to Europe, because they were green steel and met certain criteria,
exactly,
were charged at like 30-40% premiums, which vastly improved profitability.
I can imagine. And that totally shifts the mindset.
Yes, exactly. So I think that just made makes people realize that, yes, like I just need to think about what the future will hold rather than just seeing what I can do now to save my ass.
Yes.
Is the important.
I can imagine. So Shubhankar, I met you for the first time when we were in Japan.
Right.
For the audience that do not know, when you come to Stanford GSB, you have a global requirement. So you have to do either work globally or you have to go on a study trip globally. And Stanford offers a few destinations and people sign up, and based on a lottery system and your preferences, you might be allocated to one country, and then you'll be with like 20, 30, 40 people with a faculty member, and you would travel to that country and you follow a theme around a business. So for us, that was Japan.
Yeah.
The theme was culture and innovation, and that's where I met you first. And in our talks, I remember like hearing about your background and all that and what you have done, both academically and professionally. I once asked you, I was like, Shubhankar, are you a nerd? And your answer was very interesting. And by the way, you had glasses on as well. So I'm going to ask you that question again. Are you a nerd?
I am a proud nerd.
That was the exact answer you gave me. You were like, I'm a proud nerd. Yeah.
For all the nerds out there, if anybody shames you for being a nerd, just don't listen to them. I think being a nerd, especially about things that deeply excite you, and well, I don't know, it could be anything from sustainability to comic books to world history. I think, by being a nerd about the things that you're passionate about, by really knowing them deeply and well enough to like create the kind of change that you want to see, you are doing a service to yourself and to everyone else.
I can imagine. But like, I wanted to bring this up because I want to also let you talk about a different facet of your life that you haven't had a chance to talk about. You're a nerd, a proud one, yeah. And admittedly, you're very successful academically, professionally. But I know that in sports, you were also pretty successful. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, where did you fit that in your life? What were you doing as a sport? Like, how did that shape your experience?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you asked me about that, but I was just going to come to that, being a nerd also does not preclude you from doing so many other things. I think sports was a very critical part of my life growing up. And again, both my parents had played sports seriously during their university days. And I think both of them were very categorical when they were bringing my brother and I up, that yes, have fun and go outdoors, but you have to play a sport and you have to play it seriously. And back then it felt a little forced, but now I realize that there is just so much that I have to thank swimming, which is my sport, for. I think
Swimming.
Yes.
Yes.
So I used to have a record, and I'm sorry about bragging, but I used to have a record. It's been broken now. For covering the maximum distance in a continuous 12-hour swim. So I swam 26 kilometers continuously, 12 hours
kilometers.
and 12 hours without coming out in the water.
Wait, did you cross the Indian Ocean? Or?
The ocean is very, very vast, my friend.
Yes.
26 kilometers doesn't get you from
Jesus.
there. Yeah.
Jesus. 12 hours.
Yes.
And then, you swam.
I swam, and I had like some of my swim teammates doing it with me. So that's what kept me going. But I think the most interesting realization I had in that entire journey is that, you would expect that this is a feat of the body. That I can clearly tell you it is not. It is a feat of the body for the first 2 hours, but after the first 2 hours, whether you swam 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers or 15 kilometers, your hands, legs, back, everything is gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Given up.
Everything is given up.
Yeah.
And the only thing that can keep you going is just the supremacy of the mind over the rest of the body. So if your mind can force your body to do things, then your body will respond.
Yes.
So I think, for anybody who says it's a physical endurance feat, I say, no, it's a mental endurance feat.
Believe me, I can imagine that. And that's mentally, I hate any cardio-related activity. As
I know, we've had interesting discussions.
People famously know I hate running, any form of endurance cardio, because I just cannot be tolerating that mentally. But it's fantastic that you have done it. Proud of you, really. Are you still swimming?
Yes, I try to make it out to the Avery Sports Center once in a while, which has a pool. I think one of the biggest reasons that I came to Stanford, and of course this is not rooted in any sort of logic because I'm obviously not joining the varsity team, but is that Stanford has the craziest record in swimming ever. Stanford by itself has more gold medals in swimming than countries have won over their entire history. And one of my most admired swimmers is someone who practices at the very same pool, Katie Ledecky. If you folks know her, she's got like 1 billion gold medals at the Olympics in this point. I think the number's around 10, but and the fact that, she's there at the same pool, just
inspired,
mind-boggling to me.
I can imagine.
The first time that I visited Stanford, which was 3 years ago, I bumped into her. I was just here visiting some friends who were doing their masters or their PhDs, and I bumped into her, and I couldn't believe it. And I think from that day, like this was not on my why Stanford essay, but this is a very big part.
It could have been.
Yeah,
it could have been. I mean, we could talk about that. But what I remember, so the whole conversation about sports, I remember started when we were at the gym,
right,
in a beautiful hotel in Kyoto, Japan. And you were inside the gym, and I walked in to start working out. And you were, I think, walking on a treadmill, and I saw your humongous calves. I was like, Jesus, why does this guy have these calves? Your calves are admittedly pretty big. So I think our conversation started from there. So, folks, a conversation from calves can lead to anywhere. It could lead to a podcast. Yeah? But yeah, let's talk about Stanford a little bit more. Like, what clicked in your head that you were like, I want to pursue an MBA, a grad school? I know that for coming out of IIT and kind of going into consulting in India, grad school or business school is kind of a predefined choice for a lot of people. But I want to like drill a bit deeper into like your why, like what did you feel and why then? Basically, why last year?
100%.
Decision, yeah.
I think a little bit of background here will be interesting because, like to your point, it's if you're an engineering grad going into consulting, you've been to a good school, you've been good academically, and MBA does seem like a natural next step, just the way we're brought up in India. So like keeping that in mind, when I was graduating high school and I had when I was graduating undergrad and I had my consulting offer ready, I also ended up applying to a bunch of the 2+2 programs, which, you know, if folks in the audience are not aware of, almost all top schools in the US now give you the opportunity to apply as a senior in college to one of their B school programs, and you have a guaranteed seat if you get in. And then you have the flexibility to work for 2 to 5 years, take professional risks that might have otherwise been difficult, and, you know, still end up coming to and still end up matriculating at whatever B school you picked.
When you say everybody should apply for that kind of a 2+2 program,
Yes.
Because I think there's this whole myth going around that if you apply and you get rejected, you're kind of blacklisted or your chances are low as a reapplicant. I know that a bit of that might be true, not about blacklist, but your chances could be a bit lower if you have applied after a few years of work. But would that apply also to the 2+2 programs?
That's an interesting question. And of course, I'm not on the admissions committee of any of the schools yet.
Yes. Yes.
So I think, like, you know, the audience should take my answers with a pinch of salt. However, I feel very strongly that there is zero downside to applying, because if you don't get in, there is at least a 3 or 4 year window
Exactly.
before which after which you need to apply again. No school keeps records that far back.
Exactly.
First. The second is, in most schools, right, when you apply, say, if I was a full-time applicant and I applied to a school right now and then I didn't get in and I applied next year, most schools would ask me to write a reapplicant essay next year to talk about what has changed between this year and next year that necessitates a reconsideration of my application. If the last time you applied was through the 2+2 program, most schools don't even ask for a reapplicant essay because they knew that was just a shot that you took when you were a senior in high school, when you were a senior in undergrad. Didn't necessarily have a very clear view of what you were going to do, had zero professional work experience. So they understand that was in the past and they evaluate your application afresh. So most schools don't, if you applied for the 2+2 and not rejected, in most cases, you don't even need to write a reapplicant essay.
Yes, I can imagine.
So I think there are there's of course other things that you want to take into account, but I don't think a fear of being blacklisted in the future is something candidates need to think about when applying to the 2+2.
I can imagine.
I think the upsides far outweigh the risks.
Great.
I had this deferred admit, and then I actually started working, and I was having, and this is a very unpopular view in consulting, but I was having the time of my life at McKinsey, and I really started reconsidering whether I actually even wanted to get an MBA.
I can imagine.
So 2 years into the job, I was sitting on a bunch of deferred admits, but I didn't feel so strongly about getting an MBA. I thought, the path that I was on was exciting to me, and I just wanted to keep going faster and faster.
Had you applied to GSB or Stanford as well?
I did.
And you had the admission?
No, I was rejected the first time.
Okay, so you were rejected to Stanford the first time you applied as a...
Stanford was the only school that I applied to that rejected me. And as Destiny's had it after.
Yes, I can imagine.
You'd never say never.
So you were like, I'm good. I'm having a good life at McKinsey.
Right.
Work is good. Should I even go back to this? Go to business school or grad school? But again, what clicked?
I think there were two very powerful shifts that happened. The first is that my fiance decided to come to GSB. And
then your partner, yeah?
Yes, she was. She was my girlfriend back then. She was my partner, and she got into GSB, and she started here. So she's currently like a year ahead of Saleh and me. She's an MBA too in the program.
She's not older than us. She's just a year ahead.
She's just a year ahead. She started her MBA early. She interestingly had a deferred admit.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And how we met was me helping her through that application. But
very smart. Very smart.
But she started, and I think just 1 year of long distance across India and San Francisco, which is literally the other side of the world, made me a lot more amenable to the idea of coming here. But I think even more powerful than that was a conversation with one of my mentors, who is a senior partner at McKinsey and also ended up writing my recommendation letters. And, he said that it's phenomenal that you love this job and you're good at it, and everybody wants to have you here, etc. But he said that you're, by not taking this opportunity, the only person that you're harming is yourself. And he it sounds a little strange, but then he explained it. He said, this was the first job that you had. Yes, you've seen a lot of the world in this job, but this is still like the only job you've had. And yes, you love it, but you won't know what you love and don't love till you go out and try something else.
There is so much out there.
There is so much out there which you've not even tasted.
Yes.
So there is no way for you to know that, yes, you like this so much, but you don't know if there's something out there that you will like even more.
Yes.
And he said, even if you go and see things that are out there and then still decide that, okay, this is where I want to be because this is the best place. He said, then you'll spend the rest of your life with that satisfaction.
Yes.
That this is where I'm supposed to be.
I've seen it. I've done it. And
yes.
This is my choice. I can imagine. Why did you not want to go to the schools that you already had admissions from? Like what made that? What made that switch in your head that, oh, Wharton, no, or whatever other admissions you had, no, and I want to go for a new school, or again try Stanford GSB?
That's an interesting question, because the way I was looking at it, it was GSB or nothing, and I think that sort of conviction came from a lot of places. Of course, one very strong place that it came from was that my fiance was here. And
we will cut it here for you. We will cut it here. You can send this much of the media to her. Okay.
My fiance was here, and all the other schools that were in consideration were all on the East Coast and were a big distance again.
Yeah.
I think another very big swinging factor, as somebody who works in climate tech and sustainability, was the fact that Stanford is leading the charge.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of different ways as far as climate tech and sustainability go. For the audience, Stanford is one of the very few places that has a dedicated school for climate change. It's called the Doe School of Sustainability, and it was founded very recently with a very large endowment. So, of course, they're putting in the resources to solve problems that they think matter the most. I think the third thing that really drew me here, and this was, just from speaking to my fiance and visiting her multiple times during her first year.
Good weather. Good weather. Really.
I think California weather is good,
but Bay Area,
I would take it with a pinch of salt.
Oh, okay.
No, but I think the one thing that I noticed here, and it has a lot of underlying factors, but the spirit of community at GSB in particular is just incredible, in the sense it's a small tight class.
Yes.
About a third or half the size of most other programs.
Yes.
People at Stanford are remarkably willing to share, to be vulnerable, to really have conversations that otherwise, take years to build the kind of trust that you need to have those.
Yeah, you're right. Exhibit A for that.
I think, that kind of sense of community and shared vulnerability.
Yes, I can imagine.
Is very, very nice. And I think, I spoke about this in the beginning, is that from where I grew up, a sense of community is what really keeps me engaged and motivated. And I think in the few visits that I made to the GSB, I found that very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So I think like it just seemed like a very good fit.
Shubhankar, let's look a little bit deeper into your application.
Yes.
So you applied as a 2+2 to Stanford. You got rejected. You worked 3 years for McKinsey. You applied again. You got it. So everyone knows that the MBA application is a very holistic process. They take a lot of factors into account, from your test scores, your GPA, your work experience, what you want to do in the future, your recommenders, all of that stuff. Yeah. And whatever you have done in the past in terms of leadership and all that. So I would argue that your work in McKinsey and understanding what you like to do, for example, with sustainability and climate change and all that, helped you actually have a better story that you could craft towards Stanford GSB. And I think that is very powerful when it comes to MBA applications. So I want a lot of the audience to notice that, yes, you could go ahead and submit applications to different schools, but being able to tailor your story, your life goals towards the school that you're applying to, and making sure that that school has the resources to offer you. For example, in your case, Stanford as a university has a Dover School of Sustainability. That is a very powerful thing. So you can mention in your application, it shows your knowledge of the school and your dedication to it, but also it shows the school that they can offer you what you need for your career progression. Would you see it the way I see it?
100%. I think one thing that that a lot of folks, when they do their application process, tend to neglect is that, yes, the school is evaluating you to see if you're a good fit for the school. But at the same time, the school is also expecting you to evaluate if the school is a good fit for you.
Exactly.
So it is a two-way relationship, right? Like it's an investment that you're making. It is significant, not just in terms of the financial implications, but also the fact that you're stepping away from 2 years at a time when you're growing rapidly in your respective careers.
Yes.
And taking this break. So it needs to create their value.
Yes.
Right. For it to maintain,
exactly
the sort of aura or the brand that it has.
Yes.
So the school is equally concerned. And I think that is one thing that participants will do well to understand.
Yes.
But to your point, I think I have if I had to leave you with 2 specific messages, there would be one, exactly to what Saleh said. You can never go wrong by being too specific. I think specificity in what it is that matters to you, specificity in where you want to go, and specificity in how the school will help you get there, down to the point of talking about exact resources and how they will help you in something that you might want to do in the future, will be super, super helpful. And I think an easy example for me to give about that, like, we already spoke about Door, but is also say the fact that GSB has an impact fund, and one of the teams within the impact fund does climate tech investing. And as someone who's done a lot of strategy and ops work and is also looking to understand the investor lens to climate, the fact that I can get here and actually work on live deals that, not only build an understanding and a network of the ecosystem, but also build the actual hard skills like the due diligence toolkit.
Yes.
Will be something that when I go back into my job. So I spoke about how being at the impact fund as a climate tech investor, 10 years down the line, when I'm perhaps leading, the strategic investments team or the new business development team at an energy major, will help me not just think strategically and operationally, but also financially.
Yes.
And think about what are the kinds of companies that I want to partner with. So establishing that link for the admissions committee to see that, okay, A, this person has done their research, and 2, they've thought deeply about what they want to do with their time here.
Yes. I want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the audience would be like in your case, if people are watching and dialing in from India or from an Indian background, okay, how can I get to know a little bit more specific what Stanford has to offer? Yeah.
Right.
I see the website and all that, but you and I know once you come here and you get that Stanford email address and inbox, the wealth of the resources is extremely overwhelming. Okay? We could not even have imagined this last year, not even be able to process it. Yeah. So how would you recommend them to go about like understanding what are the resources, how they can tie their stories to? So in my opinion, they could reach out to current students like yourself, like myself, or other people. But do you think of anything else, like how can they find out what is there to offer?
I think Stanford and a lot of universities for that matter have done an incredible job of removing access barriers for this. To this point, I think one of like 10 years back, one of the things that made the admissions process somewhat unfair is that there were some students who could afford to fly in, sit here in a class, attend admissions weekend, etc., and really get a flavor of the school and then write about it in their applications. I think the way schools have gone about reducing some of those inequalities is, most schools now appoint MBA first years and second years as admissions fellows. Like almost every school has an admissions fellows program, which
I have been selected as one.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, I know. I think that's so good, because I think, when people see people like from that region, from like people that they can identify in the target programs, I think it just seems, it makes them feel that it's a lot more achievable.
Exactly.
So I am so glad you're doing this.
Thank you.
But yes, like the admissions fellows is one part of it. If you sign up and look at the Stanford admissions website and look at it in detail, there is a lot of virtual events, which includes actually having one-on-one 15-minute conversations with admissions committee members and really asking them about specifics of, certain academic requirements or certain courses, to the actual opportunity to join a class virtually and see some of our very esteemed faculty members teach, to open houses conducted by some of the clubs where you can understand, what student leaders in different clubs do and how joining a professional club or an athletic club can create a meaningful difference in your life.
Yes.
And I think just having those conversations will, of course, there's you and I both know there's no equivalent to actually being here, but I think it will give you as close a flavor as possible for you to actually capture some of that richness when you write down your essays.
Yes, I can imagine. But different parts of the application, you have to take a Gmat or a GRE. Which one did you take?
I did the Gmat.
How did you feel about it?
I think the Gmat, and again, for folks who are now considering about writing it now, Gmat has a new focus edition, which has a different scoring system and a different set of weightages. I think Gmat, like the original one that we gave, and I'm sure I don't know if you guessed the Gmat, the old one. I had like an equal amount of focus on both quantitative and verbal skills, and I think for those there's no substitute to practice. I think I just like practice, didn't spend too much time like reading theory, etc. I just took mock exams one after the other till I was in the range of hitting like what I thought would be a good score.
What did you think would be a good score?
So I went in thinking that, given I already have a quantitative background, so the bar is slightly higher, considering I'm an engineer, did consulting, which is like, again, an analytical toolkit.
Yes.
The bar is higher. So I thought like, somewhere that gives me the 98 to the 99 percentile, around like the 740 to 760 kind of range, would be a good score.
Did it end up being in that range?
On my first attempt, I got a 770, which met my targets.
Yes.
But for folks who don't, back then there was also an AWA component to the Gmat, an analytical writing assessment, which for some reason I did not do really well on. So I wanted to take the test again, which I did. Improved my actual score, did not improve my AWA.
What did you? What did you improve your score to, if I may ask?
I improved it to the 100th percentile.
Which means what score? Is it 790? Is it 790 or is it?
It's an even 800.
You scored full mark on the GMAT.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Do we have a few classmates have scored?
Yes, and I think there's like a bunch of folks. I think somebody gave it 5 years back, somebody gave it 3 years back. My score had almost expired by the time I applied, but there's folks who just like got an 800 last year, which is
Wow,
crazy.
that is fantastic. But I'm sure you also would admit that the GMAT score is not the only thing that would get you in, but you would need to have a good GMAT score also to show your analytical aptitude. And I think in your case, even 770, like of the old GMAT would be good enough, I'm assuming. Yeah.
The funny thing is, Ale, when I was speaking to some of the folks, like, I was just scoping around, seeing what schools I should apply to, and I spoke to a bunch of admissions consultants. And they told me that whether I had a 730 or 750 or 770 or an 800, in my case, did not matter. They said like it presents zero incremental evidence to the school.
Because your analytical side was kind of established.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the entire purpose of the GMAT is to certify to the school that you're somebody who has analytical aptitude, has a basic level of comfort with English, and can solve problems that have a mathematical twist to them.
Yes.
And that is all that it proves.
Okay.
Right? And the fact that I was an engineer from a good school in India and had a decent GPA, just already took care of those factors. So, like, if I would have made a mistake if I thought, oh, like, I have a good GMAT score, then I'm going to get in. Luckily, most consultants pointed that out to me very quickly. That, okay, like this GMAT score is great, but it doesn't change anything for you.
What do you think about admissions consultants? Like, do you think one should hire them? We know that they're quite expensive. Yeah. Depending on your background, it could be a little bit different. But, and I know that there are a lot of admissions consultants who focus on, for example, the folks from India.
Yeah.
And likewise in the US and whatnot, the feeder countries, basically. But what do you think about that?
And just for the sake of transparency, I think a few things that the audience should know. I did take an admissions consultant, and I partnered with them for my Stanford application. I think the decision is a deeply personal one. I think where admissions consultants help is to give you an outsider perspective on your application. And what I mean by that is when you start writing and when you start thinking about your story, two things happen. One, you think something that you did or something that you accomplished or something that you realized or learned is very evident, but it's evident to you. It might not be evident to somebody who's reading it, somebody from a different culture, somebody from a different industry who has no background.
Understood.
So I think bridging that communication gap, what is implicit and evident to me versus something that comes across as a powerful story is where they help.
Basically, they can zoom out, look at that, and have fresh perspective and understand if this makes sense.
100%. The other pitfall, which I think, like, at least I've been guilty of, is that you write something and you fall so much in love with your own narrative.
Oh, tell me about that.
It's like, this is the most, like, this is, there was Shakespeare and then there is me.
Or in your case, there was Robin and Tagore and there is me. Yeah.
100%. You have that reference. But yes, you just get so consumed by your own narrative, and that's not a bad thing, because what the schools expect you to do when you're writing that is just think so deeply and get so involved in the process that, like, every word of your application feels so dear to you that, like, when somebody comes in and slashes it and suggests edits, you don't want to take it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, but it's necessary, because I think, like, sometimes you get so consumed in your own narrative that, like, and again, an outsider lens help. The third thing, and I think this is slightly more relevant in my case than it was in yours, is the community or the demographic that I come from.
Yes.
An Indian male engineer turned consultant.
Yeah.
I think, like, and I'm sure you know this, is a very common demographic in the applicant pool. And for no one's fault, everybody's had similar experiences.
Yes.
Everybody values similar things. Everybody's accomplished, like, the accomplishment is also somewhat similar. So where the consultant, because they've looked at a bunch of applications from this demographic, they know the other folks are applying in the cycle, they know what has worked historically in the past. I think my consultants helped me really focus on the stuff that differentiated me, right? That what puts me like what separates me from everybody else in the demographic.
Yes.
I think that is where it was super, super helpful.
Yes.
Because I spent my entire application only talking about the things, or like delving into the details that were non-stereotypical.
So basically they helped you with the positioning. With a lot of that positioning, like what aspects of your background do you have to bring out and how you have to position yourself as opposed to the whole pool of applicants. I think it was very helpful for you.
Yeah, I think that did end up making a lot of difference, because then I was able, in the initial draft of the applications that I wrote, I spent a lot of time talking about the kind of work I did in McKinsey, or, talking about like how I solved this crazy analytical problem that was plaguing the team and like fixed the model. And my consultant came in and said, like, okay, impressive story, but nobody's down. No, like everybody knows you will be crazy good at analytics. Like if I looked at your resume, it is evident to me already.
Yes.
So can we talk about, how you motivated a team member, how you had someone get over their fear of public speaking, how you got two parties who were disagreeing and not coming together to work on a project, to work together.
Yes.
Right. So I think like all the more human sides of my application was something that they encouraged me to focus on. And I think one of, another thing another piece of advice which I really, really liked, I think a lot of MBA applicants tell themselves that, I have like a very typical profile. I went to a big consulting firm, I went to a big tech firm, or I went to like the big four. So I really have nothing to talk about in my applications. I think it is like the advantage with having been at one of these places, which already sends so many students to BCS, is that you don't have to waste any space on your application explaining what you do. The school knows what you do.
They know it.
They know it. They know what the challenges are, etc. So you can really focus on what makes you unique. And I think in an MBA application process, where the real estate that you have to show yourself is so limited,
absolutely,
it's a huge boost, because you can only a lot of folks who come from unconventional backgrounds,
they have to
explain what they do. So you don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. I love that advice. So just to bring my perspective on it, as someone who did not hire admissions consultants, but the reason I mentioned, I surely needed that like third perspective or the outside perspective. So what I did is that I had like two very close friends of mine that I trust a lot, and they know me quite a lot. And I every now and then would send my application material to them, and then I would ask them to read and see if this is a reflection of who I am, and if they feel like my achievements or my accomplishments are kind of coming out of it.
Yeah,
it's a risk. You don't sometimes feel comfortable sharing those kind of stuff, especially because some of the things you often write in applications are deeply personal or vulnerable. But having good friends with that helps. So that's what I did. But you're here, Shubhankar. You've been admitted. Thank you for giving us a lot of all those tips and a bit of like a view into your admissions process. What is next for you? You're here. What are you looking at for your summer, for you after GSB? I'm sure you're going to be a future leader, but what are the few immediate steps afterwards?
I think that's a tough question to answer, because like GSB presents, and Stanford more broadly presents, such an overwhelming array of opportunities. But I think what the target that I've set for myself is that I want to experiment with things that currently make me uncomfortable, in the sense, if there's skill sets that I lack, like for example, for a little while back, we spoke about investing as a toolkit.
Yes.
Right. And again, I've done due diligences for clients in the past, but it's just that like, I have zero background in finance. I've never studied it. I'm not even saying that I want to be that, I want to come out of GSB as an investor. I'm just saying it is outside my comfort zone. So I want to go and do it. So I want to just stretch myself beyond that.
Yes.
Similarly, I think Stanford has an incredible array of entrepreneurial opportunities. Classes like Lean Launchpad, Startup Garage, Hacking for Climate, Stanford Climate Ventures, which really take you through the 0-1 process of setting up a company that, from like identifying a problem that you want to solve to finding what product and how it fits into the market to actually then building a company. And again, I don't think like I've been an accidental entrepreneur in the past. I'm not very sure I want to be an entrepreneur, but I definitely want to use these resources to become more entrepreneurial as a person. And
what should become an accidental entrepreneur again? No, I can imagine.
Yes, but I think like the point that I want to make is I'm not running after these opportunities necessarily because I want to make a career out of them. I just want to treat them as growth opportunities, learn and walk away as a more well-rounded leader.
Amazing.
Yes. Being at Stanford like seems like serendipity, and not just because, my fiance being here is a huge part of that, but I feel like, the whole ethos of what you're trying to do here, what everybody around us is trying to do is so similar to what I had in undergrad. And I'll just elaborate on that because I just spent so much time talking about the differences between IIT and Stanford. But like we just discussed earlier in this podcast, Stanford's motto and GSB's motto, is change lives, change organizations, change the world. I remember my commencement address in undergrad. The speaker was the former director of IIT Bombay. And again, to understand this quote, you need a little bit of context, which is, yes, very few people in India pay income tax. But everybody in India, if you purchase any goods or services, you pay a goods and services tax on it. And the IITs are entirely publicly funded. And, from Stanford, change lives, change organizations, change the world, to my former director who said at commencement to all of us that even the poorest of the poor in some remote corner of India who buys soap and pays tax on it has a stake in your education. I think there is remarkable synergy because both these places that I went to talked about not the privilege of being here, not like congratulatory or, or it's great, like this is so tough and you got here. It's more about the onus that's on you, that you've been given this incredible opportunity.
The responsibility.
Yes, there is so much that you owe to everybody around you, and what will you do that will make their lives easier? And I think that is where both these institutions are very, very similar.
So Shubhankar, I have one last question. What advice do you have for a person who is like yourself, coming out of a small town in somewhere in India and wants to make or dreams of making impact on a global level?
Don't undervalue yourself. I think it's very easy when you see all the big decisions happening in big corporate boardrooms in big cities to think that you don't belong there, that you don't have a voice there, that somehow because people grew up with more resources, with more opportunities than you, they have the right to make decisions that you don't. And I think that feeling is very natural. It takes a while to get rid of. But I think just the realization that your experiences are as valuable, you are as talented, and that you have as much of a right to be there as someone who grew up in Delhi or New York or Singapore or Shanghai, is just something that you need to believe, when you're having these conversations.
That's great. Shubhankar Seth, you are the Odysseus of your story from the foothills of Himalaya. You're here now, and I'm sure you will give back to that community and you'll have a homecoming. Thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Fantastic.
I had a lovely time.
Great.